Well, Miss Lynelle, thank you for being here. So for our audience, we have a super special guest tonight. And this is going to be one of those ones that I'll ask all of you to sit back, listen, ask questions if you have them, and keep your minds wide open. This is going to be a fascinating journey to really maybe expand your own personal consciousness on what healing is or what it may look like even, because we certainly have this kind of traditional box that healing takes place in. I'm going to try to switch up our view here. And with that being said, Lynelle, I am not going to try to fill in all the blanks of everything about who you are and what you do. All I know is this, is that I think it's been about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years now.
Almost over a year and a half now, I think.
Okay. That somehow we're going to get into this. Well, I want to get into how you even landed in Seagrove, Florida, Balance Health Studio. We'll get there in just a moment. But so our audience has a general idea of what we're going to talk about tonight. You are an intuitive integrated healer. We'll start with that. And we'll help define that a little bit as we go here. And yet your background, you're a nurse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I find that fascinating. It doesn't surprise me. I often talk to people about their healing, their healing journeys, because always we're going through them as practitioners. We always have our own journey that we go through. That's part of what helps make us an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then simultaneously, often there's something in our DNA. And I think you can understand, like, I think you and I get this. There's something in your DNA that says you were born to do this.
Yes.
But you didn't know what that was. So you just start on a journey. And, right. And it sounds like you're started on the journey of being a nurse. So let's the best that you can give myself and the audience. How did you get here today? Where did Lynelle come from? Where did it start? Where are we now? And then we'll get real deep here tonight.
Yeah, I'll give a very short sort of version of it, but it's kind of beautiful because what it comes back to also is like how we all have like this divine path and this, which goes really deep into that space. But I would tell you when I was in 10th grade, I had this this awareness of like, I'm going to be in pediatric oncology. And I was like, doctor, nurse. And then I was like, well, I know I want a family and children nurse. So I went right into it. And the college I actually picked was Marquette in Milwaukee, which there was very deeply spiritual. It's a Jesuit college. And so it just delved me a little bit in there. So I picked up some stuff there and then went into the nursing work, my world. And I'll tell you, when people sometimes ask, when do you feel like you first knew that there was a connection? And if I had to pick favorite group of kiddos, it would be my oncology, but also the neuro kiddos. And so I used to talk to them. I'd look at them and it just felt like I could talk to them right into their eyes. And their parents sometimes at first meeting, like, they can't hear you. I'm like, oh, but they can. And so it was this beautiful dialoguing connection then with the kids. And then moving on, I went, took 4 years off, and then I had my own healing journey with leaving that part of my life, and then went back into nursing, but went into outpatient pediatric oncology. So really delving a little deeper into the one-on-one, and then became really close. A lot of my kiddos I took care of were tended to have metastatic disease. And so became very connected in their end of life journeys as well. And then that was divinely guided then to like, Lynelle, it's time to leave. It's time to go do hospice. So I'd been at the Cleveland Clinic for like 17, 18 years. So to leave that place that trusted me, they're like, you want to do oils, Lynelle? Do oils. You want to do this? It was growth. But then I went into pediatric hospice and even deeper connection into the energy work, the healing work, and really connecting to help children and their families at end of life. And then it just, at the same time, I was delving more into doing the intuitive healing work out, like in the after hours in the evening, helping people. So kind of the brief sort of, but I would say that's where it just in my own healing journey, I became deeply connected to the healing and my connection. And then just as I worked with kids more and more, the teenagers, especially when they were getting their chemo, like, can you please lay your hands on me? So while they were getting their chemo, I would lay my hands. And then what was happening is I would be working on them, and then I could feel like where new tumors were. And I was still kind of new and just playing with this. And then I would just tell my doc I work with him, like, I feel something here and here. And it was before scans. And I'll never forget the one beautiful girl I was so connected with. My nurse practitioner I work with walked out and she showed me the scans and she goes, "You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do." She goes, "Every spot you told us a couple of weeks ago is all there." And I was like, okay. And so there's kind of a little synopsis of where I came to now. And then I left. It was very divinely guided, like, it's time to leave this, Lynelle, and just focus on this. So, and then, yeah.
Wow. So several things. Then I want to back up a step.
Yeah.
So when I think about what you just said there, so you spent 17 years at one of the most, like renowned clinics in the world, Cleveland Clinic. So deep down into science, technology, advancements in all of this stuff. And yet to some degree, all of that, your takeaway was to back up and go inside.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll just let's put that on the table for a second here.
Yeah.
I want to back up so our listeners can get a feel what we're even talking about. I think we jumped the gun a little bit. If you had to describe what is intuitive healing, what is intuitive integrated healing, well, what does it look like? What is so someone's just listening and they're listening to the Dr. Bart Health Made Simple show, and all of a sudden they see us talking about what you're putting hands on people, finding tumors. What are you talking about? What is this intuitive healing? What does it look like? What would a patient or what would a client expect if they came and saw you?
So some come, it's actually really beautiful now. I have people who come in. I was sharing the example today of, they go into the doctors and they headache, heart coming out of their chest, and they go and there's, they get scans and they have all the things and nothing's showing up. Well, in doing this work, I can feel them. So I can feel the head, I can feel the heart, and everything they're feeling is so real. So when they go in and they have someone telling them there's nothing there, there's nothing showing up, to be able to give them confirmation that yes, what you're feeling is very real, but it's something deeper than that. There's usually what you can feel, this energy within them that usually comes from something deeper that we then delve into, usually something, an old trauma, an old wound that has been slowly opening up, and it builds very slowly. So it often doesn't hit us like that. So what I do is I feel into it and then give them confirmation that what they're feeling is very real. And then how do we then walk through that journey with them, and then delving into what it looks like. And then, so that's on more of the medical piece. And then now I have more psychologists and therapists sending their mental health clients. And it's really beautiful. We're actually going to work on a study with it, but also feeling that energy and how do you help them breathe through it, work through it. But so on my end, I feel, just to give you a brief, like I'll feel heat in an area and but I'm also, the intuitive part is very much guided to go to a space and we all work so differently in what we feel and move. And I think that's the greater gift, is that why there's so many different types of healers. But for me, is going in and kind of feeling where I feel the most accumulation. And often that's where they feel their pain, and when you can find spots to help them through. And then working through the deeper piece of where did this come from? Where is it rooted in? And how do we travel that out and move?
Okay. So I heard you use the word guided.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to, I know, but I want to go there. I want to talk about what does that mean? Because that sounds woo-woo, like guided. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Is someone taking your hand? Is someone helping you see visions? Is someone speaking to you? And then let's just go right there. Talk to me about when you say guided, what does that really mean? And I understand, because we've had some conversations, And I see the result of people walking through, and there's not a lot of time, quite frankly, people don't have the words. But for our listeners, what does guided mean?
So I always honor, and it's interesting because sometimes people come in and they will say it took them a bit to come in because they were afraid it was like the religious aspect is pulling them away from coming in because they feel it's some sort of
Witchcraft or something. Who knows?
yes, thank you. Yeah. And so they come in and then they realize what they feel is beyond words and sometimes in tears. And so I very much honor that. I will say I'm almost like a divine conduit. So there is this aspect of healing energy that comes through and goes through me to the client. And then what I'm removing comes out of them back through me. So I do feel it, but goes right out. And then guided, sometimes I do hear words, I hear, and the beautiful thing is that's where sometimes people will come in and they'll be in tears after and just say, you just did 20 years of therapy in one session. And it's so much has to do with the words were given that touched a space that they weren't ready to say out loud, but I could say it for them. And then they were like, oh. So sometimes the words are given. I sometimes feel like not sometimes, but I don't feel like I work alone in the room, and they can feel it and they feel connected to it. So it almost then makes them feel very safe. But you're right. Often they walk out and they like, I don't have any words for that.
So when you say sometimes, not sometimes, but most of the times, you feel as though someone's in the room working with you. That's got it. Are you talking about maybe a deceased family member, an angel, a spirit? What does that mean?
All of the above. Because it's funny, I always go in with an open mind, and I always tell, because I'm there to be like, I often say like the triad. But it doesn't mean that people don't come into the room. So sometimes they can be pokey, sometimes they can just be beautifully present and want them to know like, hey, when you've been going through all this stuff, I have been there with you. And so you don't feel alone. And then sometimes it's very quiet and it's something between, their higher power and themselves. And I can see things, and I'll see like a bright light, or I'll see they're weeping and they're having their own. And so it's it's a very close connection with them. I'll tell you a beautiful example would be when I go to do mission work, and I can tell you, my Spanish is very un poquito, very small. So the beautiful example there is that I'm laying my hands and working with these individuals, and they just start weeping, and they're like, Dios, Dios, and which means God. And so it's like, there's no words happening because sometimes the interpreter's not there. So it's just me trying to help them with my hands and pointing, and they just weep. So to even go to that depth, that it's almost like you were saying, when people walk out and have no words, there's no dialogue between like us because they can't speak English. My Spanish is so little, and yet they can feel everything, and just they're moving their bodies again, and they're, and it's quite beautiful.
It's when we start talking about work like this, I've been in healthcare for 25 years. Obviously, you've been in for a long period of time. So these are normal conversations. And I think these are normal graduations as you continue. I was having a conversation with our staff today and talking about healthcare providers being in service in life in general. This could be anything, but when you are in service, I think it's intertwined in your DNA. And when it's intertwined in your DNA, it never leaves you. So when you're on vacation, wherever you are, there it is. Like, you are in service, and it creates this unquenchable thirst. If that makes sense.
I'm following you. Yeah.
And for anyone listening, so I think a lot of people have this in their DNA. And just like you as a nurse, you just kind of knew you had to head in a direction, and then you kept filling that thirst the best that you can. And then it gets to this place. So, and I kind of share that just because that is the journey of health and healing. And I know originally when I started, I was a chiropractor, and I helped create better alignment. Right. So that was cool. That was massive. I was helping, literally thousands and thousands of people. And then I found out that when I could put myself in a state of being, that then I would add to that adjustment, and I would add value, and I would add something extra. And then when I could figure out that individual state of energy and meet them where they were and help move them forward, then it took the entire relationship, the entire visit to a whole nother level. I say that because when I say that, I think people get it. Like people, like I'm a chiropractor, and they're like, oh, he works with the body, he's energetic. But yet somehow still, when we talk about in like integrative or intuitive healing, it's still a little bit on the outside of the box. So before, the question I'll have you now is, do you think a lot of people have the same talent you have, but just haven't unleashed it?
Yes.
Yeah, so do I.
Yes. I have actually, like, some of my college kiddos, really help. They're so interested in it once they're feeling really well. So I have a number of them that it's like almost like mentoring and helping them connect. One, she's a psychology major, but now she's going into energetic psychology. Just, but I so agree. And I think so much, even in the medical side of things. When I was, there's a lot of people that, docs that very black and white. So we became so close, they trusted, but they're like, Lynelle. And I'm like, and they're like, forget it, just lay your hands on me so I can just feel what's going on. Because their patients were feeling it. They're like, I feel this. And so I remember the one, he was sitting at his desk and he was having such a rough day, and it was dark in the room, and I was walking by and he goes, could you just go ahead and just do it? And he's like, this is what they're talking about. And I said, yeah, but I said, it's your readiness. But I so believe we all are gifted there. It's just removing all these different veils we have surrounding us.
With your own practice, do you find that there's putting yourself in a certain state makes yourself as a conduit better?
Yes.
Right. And that makes sense. And I think that's us for our listeners. And I share this because I think there's a lot of incredible healers out there. In fact, I think everybody is. I think that is more intuitive, and I think it's more natural as a human being, that part of who we are healers, every single one of us. And one is to hopefully have that understanding. Like one day, yeah, like I can be the one that helps this human being heal. And when that happens, I think the doors goes blowing wide open. And the challenge with the box in our healthcare system is that it doesn't fit inside the box. Like you start off by saying, so someone goes to the hospital and they get a scan, and then they get an x-rays and get some lab work. And inside that box, it might say that you're perfectly fine. Man, a person's in trouble because in order to do anything to maybe heal, they have to go outside of the box, but maybe they've never been exposed. So if someone is listening to this the first time, what would you say to them? Because not in judgment, but there might be some people that might just say, well, I'm not sure about that. You're telling me you're feeling, you're guiding messages, and there's energy in my body. And then what? Like, yet, do they have to be anyone special to receive this type of healing?
No, it's interesting because a lot of times what I'll have people do is they're like, this person needs to come in, but they just don't. So they'll gift them. They'll give them a gift certificate, and then they feel like obligated to use it. So it's so funny. They come in, they're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I was told to come. And so one thing I always start now by saying is the phrase, you walk into the room and you can cut the tension with a knife. Mm-hmm. We all know that phrase. And so I'll tell people, like, so what do you feel when you hear that phrase, when you feel it in your own body? They're like, oh, it's heavy, it's all these things. And I'm like, that's energy. That's energy. And so if I start them there, understanding like that's it. And then we go through, like, imagine everything you accumulated as a child, as even working on babies now, like what they accumulated just during mom's pregnancy, in going through the delivery. You can feel it. And then these moms are seeing a difference in their baby, and it's like, oh my gosh, this really exists. And so a lot of times it's just feeling it and connecting to it And then they're like, oh boy. And then they finish. So almost everybody after their first visit, they're like, I feel lighter. This is amazing. Just feeling into that, a start of feeling normal again, of start of being able to breathe again. Most often people are like, oh my gosh, I forgot what it was like to breathe, is in the first visit. And so that gives them confirmation. And sometimes they still will say, I don't quite understand it yet, Lynelle, but I know I feel really good and I want to come back. And then it's because I don't want to push them, and but they get it, they understand it. And because sometimes I can overwhelm with too much information. So I don't like doing that. But one thing you said is, and this is what I really try to make a part of my practice, is I want people to feel and connect to it, because I want people to know they can be their own healer. And they can, I love, and of course I would love everyone I work with and would see them forever and ever, but I want them to take the knowledge, to feel in, to understand their bodies enough, know when they have to come in, but do all they know, the tools that we give them to do it themselves, but then maybe work on their kids, hand that off, teach their kids. And so I really feel it's so important, like you were mentioning, just to teach people you can be your own healer and feel and connect.
Yeah, that's I would say in the past, I think it was a lost art. My last couple of years of practice, and maybe it's because of the environment we're in now, yet I find more and more people becoming more and more intuitive, which is beautiful. So I want to go to something you said here, because it's almost like not even what we're talking about, but nonetheless. So talk about babies for a moment. I don't know at what point it was in my career, yet I remember having this aha moment where a mom would come in and have 2, 3 babies, 4 babies, whatever, man, completely different energy babies. Completely, this kid's calm and cool. This one's crazy. I remember one day just randomly asking one of the moms, saying, what were you like during her pregnancy? It was the kid that had like all the symptoms of ADD and all of this stuff. And then she went on to tell me that during this time, it was the most stressful she's ever been. And the energy of the mom was completely absorbed by the baby. And now here you're telling me that, you work with those children, and people might say, well, how can children's energy be off? They're absorbing every ounce of it.
Yeah.
When I have my pregnant moms, I tell them that this might be the most sacred, most unselfish moment that if you could ever be, it would be now, because this is about this life that you're developing. You're developing them energetically, spiritually, physically, biologically. This is what's happening as you grow this child. Your thoughts, your energies, your food intake, your thought intake, your chemistry intake. Can you share with us anything? Because I think that's a fascinating place. And I don't think we even scratch the surface on the education part of teaching young moms the value, or how valuable this baby growing moment is.
Yes. So I'll give you a really sweet little story, and then a good example of how it really does affect. But I worked on this pregnant mother, and I finished, and she's got 2 other boys, and I worked on the one little boy. So I'm working on, I'm like, whoa, it's like, this is one heck of a light baby. I'm like, you have 2 sweet boys, but this one is like magical, and all these different things. Sure enough, she delivers him, and she goes, no, I don't even know what to do with him. He's so like perfect. There's nothing to like do. He just lays there, he does his thing. And he sees the chiropractor too. And so I'm working on the little boy, and I was going to work on him second. And he's laying on my table as I'm working on the one, and he's just staring at me. He's just looking at me right in the eyes. And I look at him like, go, we've met before. He got this huge smile. He's like 3 months. He gets this huge smile, and his mom goes, what is this? And I go, I know. He said, we've already connected. So it's really beautiful. And then I'll give you this story. I had, it was actually a massage therapist referred, it worked down to a grandson, but he's 3 months, and the mom, he had all this respiratory stuff, and the mom was trying to do anything she could to keep him out of the hospital. So she was doing a couple different integrative therapies. So she came to me, and in the meantime, I was feeling things with him before he even arrived. I'm like, oh, this respiratory stuff's actually from the root. It's all pushing up. So in the meantime, she comes in and she said, I had an awful pregnancy. It was very traumatic. And she said, and then my delivery was like 48 hours. And I'm feeling over the root of him. And it was so heavy. It was really just all this energy pushing up all the way up into the lungs. So it was like almost like a backflow from the root. So like tailbone all the way up. And it was just putting pressure on the lungs. And we think of energy as invisible, but it really takes up space. Like we talked about in that example of filling up the room. So worked on him for a while. And then the next day she's like, oh my gosh, he's so happy. He's smiling. He sounds better. It's really quite amazing. Now, babies, you have to be a little bit more because you're taking stuff off of them. So, and even off of us as adults. So it does shift the energy. So you have to watch, like often people feel dehydrated or headache because you're literally, I say it's like we all have a 6-foot water table and you take these chunks out and these boulders out, and then your water table's down to like 3 feet. So you have to fill it. So with babies, I have to be shorter because I can't, I can't dehydrate them, but yeah, there's such a difference in their families, like, or the moms will be like, they drank so much. They drank so much after that visit. I'm like, yeah, they have to fill the space back in. But so it's really beautiful, but and then you work on the trauma that the parent needs to now work through, because the thing is we all know this, the babies, children, I love working with kids. And then it actually changes the whole scenery of the family because they recognize, like, wait, what are we doing as a couple? And how is this trickling on our children? What are we doing as a family that this one's feeling this energy or this one's feeling this energy? So it's quite beautiful.
That's awesome. So in physics, there's a phrase or kind of a saying that says energy is never created nor destroyed. It's just transferred. With that being said, I'm thinking about this, and I had this question for me many times in my career, and I think about it daily. How do you protect yourself if you're working with this energy? And I don't know if you know the answers, but where's it go?
So I can tell you early on in the work. So when I was doing the oncology work, and I would have like I'd be doing my work. So I'd be doing my sarcoma work and insurance approval. So mind you, I'm all over the place. And then I'd have one of my teens say, can you come in the room and just lay your hands? So then I'd be running down the hall. Then I'd have a nurse who's like, can you please lay your hands on my head? And so here I would be exhausted. I would have headaches. So I had to step back and go, what am I doing? So did my own work and delve deeper into understanding it more. And I realized, wait, you have to protect yourself going into it. You have to kind of clear yourself going out of it. So I'm at a really beautiful point where it's like, what comes out of a person goes gently out, and then I'm ready for the next. But I do a lot of prayer meditation in the morning before I start. And then in between each client, a lot of kind of just quick clearing and still this prayer meditation. And it's very much, I feel, it's sort of, I've gotten this really loud, like, you're taking care of my peeps, I got you, Lynelle. So this sort of like, so I feel very held. And I'll tell you, the more and more I expand and releasing any tethers I have to like things in the world, it just makes this even wider. So even someone I had today, I haven't seen her since October, and she's like, Lynelle, that was more powerful than October. What is in? And I'm like, but me doing my work on my side and making sure that I stay expansive, it does have a benefit, So I know what I have to take care of on my end, and make sure my soul is clean and open, and yeah.
So speaking of that client who said this was more powerful than October, are there layers that people will like unravel in, like, so are repeat visits valuable?
Yes. Yeah. I always tell people, because especially sometimes people are like, why can't you just take it all off at once? And the best thing I've ever gotten is, think about how long it took you to layer that on. So as you're delving out, there's so much learning to get from each session. And what it is, it's truly a digging out, and there's layers that start lifting, and then they do I have them do their work on the outside. Sometimes people are like, Lynelle, let's just keep going, and I'll see them weekly, and then we'll spread it out, because then I want them to also see, like, what can we do here, on your end, like I want them to try. And then, but I always leave it open if you need to come back. But honestly, even with it widening more, there's more that's coming off quicker, so I can spread visits out. But on their end, they're feeling, which is why I love like our connection and working. It's sometimes they finish and they feel the next day like headaches, fluey, sometimes swollen lymph nodes, because they're literally pulling all this out. And then we beautifully can give them like supplements to kind of up the immune system during that clearing. And then they feel great, and they feel good. But now everybody leans into it, because now they're like, they're like, whoa, I don't care that I had a headache. I don't care. I realized I had that much sitting in me. So it's beautiful. It's really great.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And I think that kind of speaks to a lot of, healing modalities. I know with chiropractic or Chinese medicine,
Mhm.
I've done some hypnosis in the past, that any of those that you're using, when someone says, what if I can only get one adjustment or one acupuncture session? Phenomenal, like awesome. The gates get opened. And as you continue to stack them, and because our own consciousness plays a role in this, especially when you talk about energy, right? So
Yeah.
when I think about someone leaves your office, leaves my office, they go back out. Now they're inundated with all of the other doubts, worries, fears, concerns, and stuff that goes on in life. That kind of starts to, stack on top of that energetic healing, and may, push it down. So the opportunity to repeat the process is a training, an energetic training, which is, that part of it is so powerful to me, because I think once you start to get your body in rhythm and can really learn your own body energetically, you don't let it go back,
Yes.
because now you've seen the light. And literally, it's like you've seen the light, you felt the light within the body. Do you kind of see or feel that same way?
I am so aligned with what you said. It's yes, yes,
Mm.
because that's just it. They finish and they're like, I don't want to feel that way again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beautiful part when they ask that first visit. I'm like, you have this beautiful light, this beautiful, like, we were all made perfect. We all were created perfect. And then we came into this world and surrounded by all things and lessons. And I always tell people, I'm like, if you could just see things, this beautiful world we're in, this life, as big old classroom, which I know many of us have heard that before. So it's even like when you have someone difficult in your life and you can just perhaps change the perspective, instead of fearing that, is going, wow, this person's a good teacher for me. What are they teaching me? And embrace it. It doesn't mean you ever enable or stay in a space, but it also helps you go, what am I supposed to learn from this, versus fear? Often what happens is we go to fear. And I always tell people, I'm like, what's the opposite of fear? I'm like, trust. So what can you learn in that moment? And as soon as you feel the energy of someone or something, that you go, and I have this beautiful thing that came through a couple of weeks ago. But it was very much like, as soon as you feel like out of your root and out of your body, it's like you inhale to center, to the neutral, and then exhale, grounding in. Then you're working more from your intuitive space, which is going to tell you, this is just a classroom for me right now. And I am not meant to take all this on, and build it back up. Like you were saying, it's like, how can I now see when I walk out the door from feeling really great, like leaving balance, leaving the beautiful energy, and then going, oh, wait, I got to do the classroom out there. But how do you embrace it and go, this one's a teacher for me, this one's a teacher, and how do we move, and how do we, so I do a lot of like guidance in that. And again, that's connecting to it where they're at. So this one may be able to handle it in this space, this one in this space. And to your point too, it's also, like you said, feeling your body again and feeling what it means to feel right. And And I think that's what I so much love about the collaborative part of the energy work with chiropractic work, with massage work. It's like, I always say, you can get a massage and it feels nice and smooth on the muscle, but if that energy is under there and bound, it's going to like crinkle it all up again. It just, so you got to remove it, and then those things last longer. And, you know,
Yeah.
and same with chiropractor, because then you go and then you guys get to go in like, let me adjust you beautifully in this new space.
It really, it's so beautiful how it all really comes together.
Yeah.
Really, really is. And I think to that same conversation, so much when we're talking about energy, our surroundings, our environment, the people we hang around, the people we converse with, the energy we're letting in, the news we're listening to, the social media, whatever it may be, which then makes me think, all right, so you live in what state?
Ohio.
Ohio. Yes. And how far away is Florida, Seagrove Beach, Florida?
14 hours.
14 hours. All right. So talk to me about that. How'd you end up at Balance Health Studio in Seagrove, Florida, a little beach town from a 14-hour drive away?
Oh my gosh. So I heard about the area through a friend. And then I would say it was COVID, just start of COVID. So everybody's in like their lockdown and many people had off. So they're finding themselves. It was spring and I had, hospice was really busy. I had a number of kids that birthed out of their bodies and transitioned. And so I was really kind of overwhelmed, and everybody's finding their way and should be, you know, hopefully finding their way and enjoying the peace. And I was like, I need to get out of here. So I hopped in the car and I was like, I'm going to just drive. So I drove, but the beaches just opened that day when I arrived. So I went and I walked and I found 30, you know, they told me about 30A and I rode my bike. I want to say I rode my bike down there. I was like, this feels really beautiful. And then I was by myself and then my children wanted to go. So I took them 2 weeks later. And then I actually came back in November and there was I ended up staying across the street and I took my nephew, kids, and they just to, it was still COVID still. So they just to unwind. And I'll never forget, I never even walked into Balance, but I walked over to the smoothie place and I had the grab and go to get stuff. And I ended up talking. I let someone go ahead of me because he was in a hurry. And I came back and he's like, what are you doing here? And I told him, he goes, what do you do? And I told him, and I'll never forget, you came out with like 4 dogs and we're trying to get out of there. And he's like, this is Lynelle. She's like, holy moly, interesting. And it was really, I was like, oh, there's something here. The next day I was leaving, that was Sunday morning. I'll never forget. I walked in, I told my kids, I'm like, can I get some smoothies and juice for the ride? Go in. They're like, of course, Mom. Go in. And Kelly came, it was after the Sunday class comes around the corner. I remember Caleb was over there. Caleb helped me the day before. So Kelly comes around, Kelly looks at me and she just looks right in my eyes. I'm looking at her. She goes, hello. And I go, hello. And I'm like, I will know her forever. I'm like, something's happening. Caleb looks at us and he goes, what? Do you two know each other? And I go, nope. And he goes, did you do her class? I go, no, but I will one day. And then I walked out, was waiting for my order, and I'm just standing there and just sort of looked up and I had this loud as could be, Lynelle, you do everything I ask of you. This is where you'll land. And I still have chills right now. I just took it and I went, oh my gosh, I got my stuff, got in my car, and the kids are like, what? And I go, we'll talk about it on our 14-hour drive in a little bit. I go, I have to process. So I really beautifully, I remember writing you all an email and I was so authentic with it. I said everything I do. And sweet Whitney wrote me back and said, can you come back in January? and you all welcomed me in. And from there, it just, yeah. Talk about trust, like talk about.
Yeah, a lot of trust, right? So that's listening to, thank you so much for sharing that. And the reason why there are so many things I think every one of us does every day, and we doubt that voice. We doubt that crystal clear message that whacks upside of our head and says, yeah, this, or whatever it may be, a yes, a no, whatever, we take action, go forward, stop, move over here. And so often we're afraid of it. We're afraid of that possibility because there's such an unknown on the other side of it. And because it is a complete
Yeah.
unknown, and I think when we're talking about energy, I think this just all packs in together where when we talk about energy healing, I think it's still very difficult for a lot of people, even people that are like, I kind of open to really grasp onto it, because you don't open up a book and be like, oh, here's how you understand healing, and here's how you grasp energy. And again, I want to just kind of like throw it out there again for our audience that the more we trust that there's another component outside of x-rays and scans and labs, and there's something called energy. In Chinese medicine, they've been talking about energy for how long? Thousands of years, this weird thing called qi. We can't see it. We can't open up the body and pull it out. It is just a flowing entity, a source of energy. So I love the fact that you have used this. And I'm guessing, Lynelle, that you don't have any formal training in being guided, right?
My beautiful friend at home, she always tells people, I love the words she always gives. And I sometimes, even because I'm we humble, but she will say, I've worked with so many people around the world, and she's self-taught. She's just, and it's funny, I've kind of said, I'm like, I kind of will ask divinity, I'm like, should I go do this? Should I go do that? And I'll get back, do you not think I'm giving you enough? And I'm like, nope, we're good. So I did yoga teacher training, and she was incredibly amazing. And I did it. My intention was to bring yoga into the families of the kiddos having their chemo inpatient. So that was my intention. But what happened is the energy work, I just dug so much into it. And she was this amazing instructor. And she just tapped me even greater into it. And then from there, it just flowed in trusting.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the journey I love when when I'm talking to other people like yourself they're essentially, essentially a healer, yes, divine works through us. I don't ever consider ourselves healers per se, but we become the conduit that allows the healing to take place from above down, inside out. And yet we do all this training. And I think the training, so for me, it's chiropractic, acupuncture, hypnosis, functional medicine, that still it's cool. And for like you, a nurse, and my goodness, being a hospice nurse for children, right? Like just the fact that there is hospice nurses for children, breaks my heart. Just the thought of that breaks my heart. And then for you to move in that direction and not knowing what's calling you there, it always tells me there's a calling out there for every single one of us on any given day. And it could be for the simplest things, to go meet someone, to have a new friend in their life, to create an opportunity, maybe to help someone heal, maybe help yourself heal. And I think as we, when someone says, well, how do you, if someone's wondering what's the background or the training is life.
Yes.
Right. And to be open to the fact that energy exists here. So let's go back. Let's imagine you have someone on your table now, and they're dealing with some, the big name stuff, and I know we're not here to say, well, we cure this or cure that. How much of a role have you seen in your career in doing this practice, Hun, that you have seen healing on big levels, and I'm not to downgrade like a headache, but not just a headache, but have you seen people overcome some really challenging tasks and really challenging health stuff?
Yes. I had one woman, she came in, and she had on her spine, like the cervical spine, so the top, she was having a lot of issues in there and doing physical therapy before they were going to do surgery. And so she had heard about me, and she's like, I just don't want surgery. So she came in, and what was happening and what we could feel is there was so much pain from the death of her two sisters. She held on to it carried it so deeply right there. And once we tapped into it, and that was an example, like her one sister had come in and giving some guidance, but the one, she had to make the decision to let her go. And it weighed on her, even though it was the right thing to do. All of that just sat and sat. So when I was working on her in the first visit, all this came out and all this released. And she went to her physical therapist for her next visit. And he said, "What have you done?" He goes, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have anything to do for you, because you can so move and everything could move again. There was just so much bound and from the pain and grief she had carried for years in there. And she was good. It was good. Sometimes they'll bring, I still work on some kiddos and even adults with cancer or progressed cancer. And sometimes they'll come in for pain relief. And so it's just taking some of that off so they can just have a couple days of feeling good again. And then there's things like hips. I had one gentleman who his sister got him in there with a gift certificate. But the first thing he said, he walked into the lobby and he goes, "Just so you know, got a crappy back." And I go, "No, you don't." He goes, "My doc says I have a crappy spine." I'm like, "No, you don't." And so he comes in and he's like, we finish and he's like, "Oh my gosh." He's like, "I can breathe again." Now his hands are on patients all day long. So he's constantly pouring it in. So what we did is we talked about, how do I protect my space so I can still do my work on patients, but not carry it all the way back there. And it went and fed and just sat down the spine, but he felt amazing. He could move again. And I said, you have to keep moving it. And then he put it into practice and he's like, "Lynelle, I'm really doing great. I'm not carrying as much. I'm doing all my things." And so it was really beautiful. Different things where people talk about their, like if they come in with a sore, like oh goodness, hip out of place, hip out of whack. And even with movement and adjustment, it still seems to come back. And a lot, it's stored right there and it built up, and no one ever, often they're not thinking that energy is invisible. So it's not having this effect, but then you take it off and then they get adjusted and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it really does exist in there." So a lot of things like that.
There's common day labels, and I'll share some that are really just energy distribution issues. Anxiety.
Yeah.
Anxiety is an energy distribution issue. It's all tanked up in one direction and it doesn't flow, doesn't swing the pendulum from yin to yang or sympathetic to parasympathetic. Depression, same thing. It becomes tanked instead of heightened. It becomes suppressed energy. So we can't use energy, because remember, that energy is never created or destroyed. So those are common ones. Fibromyalgia. Doctor said, "Well, I don't really know what I'm going to call it, but you have pain anywhere and everywhere. And your tissues they're all wound up and everything hurts to touch." It's an energy issue. Chronic fatigue is another one. And these are rampant. These are just everyday common language that we use. And unfortunately, most of those I just said there, the answer ends up being some kind of, manipulation of human energy via, a drug or some kind of pharmaceutical or something. Yet always the root is, and I've watched this so many times in my career, and I'll pull out all the tools that I have to kind of work things, but I know really, I know energetically they're going to have to let go of a concept. They're going to have to move past the sadness or something that they're in. I'm guessing you've seen or experienced that 1,000 times over.
I tell her all the time that I use her as an example, and she's like, "Thank you. Someone can, if it helps someone." But this beautiful woman, and she's funny. When she finally came in, she's like, "I've heard about you. I don't know. I wasn't ready." She came in and she's like, "I'm done. I'm done with life. I'm done. This is it." And here I could already see her ahead of things. I'm like, and so to try to hold that space at the same time, I'm excited inside because they're showing me "Oh my gosh, I see her. She's magical." And she does really well. So, she was on antidepressants, on sleep meds, number of different things. And So I said, we can do this. We can do this. And so we did a lot of like, it was just so much stored energy. And now it had only been about a year and a half, not only, but for a year and a half is when this deep depression was kind of going on. And so the sweet story is there was two beautiful angels of hers, was ended up being her grandparents, but they also looked sullen during this. And they hung out the whole time. And as she's getting better, they're like, ah, excited. But I tell you this, we just kept moving energy, kept processing things. Her cheeks, like she came in gray. She became pinker. And I'll never forget, we had a visit. She goes, Lynelle, I know you tell me I'm doing well and I feel good when I leave. She goes, but I just sometimes I can't feel it. And I looked at her and I go, are you still on your meds? She goes, yeah. I go, I'm not your therapist. I go, however, you need to start coming off. You can't feel. Now you can't feel. She came off those meds. This whole thing was a span of 6 months. She is the most amazing being. Now she helps people. She's giving back. Her life's completely different. And it was just six months. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, do you realize how remarkable you are? But she went from walking in and saying, I'm done with life. And she's just, so I see her monthly now just for check-ins and to just kind of clear anything that may have accumulated. But that's a beautiful example of, but even the meds were numbing her to not even feel the goodness she was feeling.
And that right there, it is, man, feeling is so incredibly important. And we've been so taught over the years. We could go another hour talking about this yet. We have to feel. We have to feel our pain. We have to feel high blood pressure. We have to feel our aches. We have to feel our sores. We have to feel our happiness. And if we're sedated with anything, could be food, could be drugs, could be, whatever, alcohol. If we're sedated, we don't feel. And that's where that zest for life, that vitality, that push for awesomeness starts to fade away.
Yeah.
The beauty is, just like that young woman there, no matter what her age is, now she's young because that's what it does. It enlivens the spirit once again. All of a sudden, when you start to feel again, and feel the potential that we have, it doesn't matter the age, the creativity wakes up, the passion for life, the fact that just the gift of being here is, and feeling it fully is part of the wonderful journey that we're on. Literally, we could talk about this for hours. Yeah, that right there, just in that. So yeah, and since we're a little tight on time, so let's talk for a moment. If people wanted to experience a session with you, how do they go about that? I think I know that. So they would call Balance Health Studio. Maybe Whitney, with our amazing back end here of technology, will somehow make a phone number like magically appear here. And do they need to do, someone needs to come, they're going to come in, any suggestions, do they come in hydrated? Are they fully clothed? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it music? What to expect? Do you put your hands on them?
Mm-hmm. So definitely, I always tell people hydrate the day before, because it does help with the post symptoms after of like taking, like you said, the chi, taking the boulders out of the river. So it's, so hydrating is very helpful. And then also, beautifully an open mind to just, because everybody's visit's different. Each visit is different because you never know what is coming off of you that day. So open mind. And then it doesn't have to be hands-on if someone's not in a space of wanting hands-on, but most of the time people want to feel, feel. So I do hands-on. And then I use the gong at the beginning and the end to kind of help the end. It's sound healing. So it helps open, but it also helps them sort of drift away. Because a lot of times it's just about like falling away and letting yourself be in a space almost out of body so you can feel again. We carry a lot in the body. So part of the greatest gift is like, wow, I can come back and just get to know what it's like to just be what I was created to be.
Now, this type of work that you're doing, could someone do it virtually? Can they do it on the phone?
Yeah, so I could do it phone. I do FaceTime sometimes, and sometimes someone will. I have a beautiful college student who, I told her, I'm like, you're doing such amazing work. I said, we are setting something up every 2 weeks, every other week, that we just connect, and in the in between, she can just draw me in. I said, it's just this permission. So I'll have people sometimes do it. And then I start thinking about, I'm like, hey, just thinking about, like, I just totally drew you in, Lynelle, about 2 hours ago. So I always welcome people when they're in a moment of like anxiety might be coming up because something triggered it. It's really just a triggering of energy, but something lifted. And then I'm like, just close your eyes, imagine you're on the table and breathe it in. So yeah, I do from distance. Yeah.
And I knew the answer to that because it's a no-brainer. Because reality, energy has no boundaries, which is beautiful. Yeah, so it's just vibration. So I often think of it just like a radio station. When you're dialed in, you can hear from anywhere. You just got to get in the right frequency. And if it's a little static, you just dial it in, and then it's beautiful and it sounds wonderful. So, absolutely, I know that's an availability to you. So, when you're here in Florida, you're here what for? Is it a week at a time?
A week.
1 week out of the month.
Yes, but hopefully we're expanding. It's usually about every 3 weeks it turns out to be, but yeah, and then hopefully a little bit more often.
And I guess your schedule fills up pretty fast. So in the event that people want to do it, call now, and maybe sometime in the near future that would be available for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. On that time just flew right there.
It was beautiful.
So I'll ask you the question I kind of asked it. If you had a certain tip or certain suggestion that you'd have for all our listeners here today to help them move in the direction of being superhuman, one tip, what would that tip be for them?
Okay. This lately I've been just giving everybody, it's, if you can think of your whole torso as like a pressure tank, a pressure cooker, and you build this energy up. If you could just think of your throat as a valve and just, I'll try to do it this way if you could see, but like if this is your alignment of just inhaling and exhaling, it alone will help release. It's like releasing a valve. And I've been telling people, if you can just do that 2 to 3 times a day for 4 breaths, and really good exhales, like you're almost like coughing from the throat when you exhale, tipping back, you will release and just release some of that energy you're feeling in there. And it's been very helpful for a lot of different, all walks of life, because we all can let things seep in. But that would be a quick little thing that can help people immediately.
Beautiful. I love it. And I'm going to add this. I would say anyone out there that's curious, or maybe you've done something similar, you're not sure. I would say this. In the event that you feel you're stagnant, you feel as though, man, you're just not your best version, and you're seeking, but you don't even know where to seek. Maybe you have some anxiety, some depression. Maybe you have some aches and sores, and you just can't seem to get over the hump for any reason. Or maybe you just know that it's time for you to explore the next level for yourself. Whatever the reason, if you haven't done something like this, give yourself that gift. I really, really, really mean that. Give yourself that gift of see what happens when you have your energy guided in such a way that serves you in your life, and it's no longer heavy and it's flowing, because that's when I think things, you really start to feel again, and things really start to get exciting.
Yes.
All right, dear. Well, I can't say thank you enough. You're awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being in our lives. Thank you for, being here at the beach and serving our community as wonderful as that you do. I think we're going to have to do this again. I think there's probably a couple more hours that we could chat here. So thank you, Lynelle, for being here. You're absolutely awesome. Keep being you, and, and let's do this again sometime.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you all. What an amazing community too. Thank you for embracing me.
Michael, you be blessed. Take care.